The true battle is the fight for peace within, not on battlefields. Jesus. They came here not for answers, but for something deeper, not for hope. They've had enough of that. They've overdosed on promises, mantras, and 10-step programs. What they crave now is silence that doesn't abandon them, a truth that doesn't flinch. A Sun Tzu. They sit in the noise and call it normal, surrounded by notifications, stimulation, and dopamine. But no strategy can work when the enemy lives inside your mind. The war they're fighting is one they don't admit exists. Because if they admit it, everything they built collapses. The smiles, the careers, the roles they play just to survive another day. And still, when night comes, the ache returns. That ache that no one talks about. The one that whispers, "This isn't life, it's performance." The opponent is well hidden. It dresses as productivity. It speaks in the language of self-improvement. It says, "Keep going, you're almost there." But there is no there. Just burnout. Just emptiness repackaged as ambition. They've been taught to run from the ache, distract it, spiritualize it, diagnose it, medicate it. But the ache is sacred. The ache is the invitation. It's not the enemy, it's the doorway. Most strategies fail because they aim for victory instead of awareness. You cannot win a war you don't see. And right now, they don't see that they've been trained to betray themselves, for validation, for control, for belonging. They long for peace, but they fear what peace demands. Surrender, not to others, to themselves, to their shadow, to the parts they've locked in the basement and called unworthy. The grief, the rage, the exhaustion, all the sacred mess they were told to clean up. So they chase clarity when what they need is capacity, the capacity to sit in their own fire, not to extinguish it, to feel it, because only then does the real clarity emerge, that they've never been broken, just fragmented, just divided by a world that rewards performance over presence. I see them, the ones holding it together for everyone else. The silent shoulders that carry families, teams, communities. No one asks how they're doing, just what they can do, until one day they can't. Collapse is not failure. Sometimes collapse is truth, refusing to be ignored. Strategy begins with acceptance. If the foundation is illusion, no victory matters, and their foundations are cracking. This is not weakness, this is awakening. But awakening doesn't feel like light, it feels like death. The death of illusions, the death of roles, the death of coping mechanisms. And they need to hear this. They're not crazy, they're not broken. They're waking up. And they need a new strategy, not one built on denial, not one that weaponizes productivity. A strategy rooted in the courage to feel, to pause, to confront. And that strategy starts with one act: stop running. If these words are resonating with you, subscribe to the channel. This isn't content, it's a mirror. And if you know someone who's barely holding on, share this with them. It might be what keeps them breathing. And make sure to join the Telegram. We go deeper there, where masks are left at the door. Jesus. They have made kindness a costume, compassion without boundaries, love without truth, forgiveness without justice. And they wonder why they feel hollow. They were taught to be good, not whole, to be agreeable, not alive. A Sun Tzu. When goodness becomes avoidance, it turns into poison. A soft mask over a hard wound. The enemy is not the darkness outside, it's the light that refuses to see the dark within. Peace without power is not peace. It's surrender disguised as virtue. They meditate to silence the pain, not to understand it. They affirm what they don't believe, hoping the words will build the bridge they refuse to walk. They read book after book, listen to voices softer than their own, just to drown out what's already screaming inside. But healing doesn't happen through comfort. It begins when you stop lying to yourself. They've been told, just think positive, as if despair is a problem to fix, instead of a teacher to hear. So they build mental prisons from self-help slogans. Smile through grief, breathe through rage, gratitude as a shield against reality. But gratitude without grief is spiritual bypass, and joy without shadow is theater. They've been sold healing as performance, growth as consumption. They count the number of sessions, books, crystals, coaches, but real transformation cannot be scheduled. It cannot be bought. It begins when they finally say, "I'm tired of pretending." That's the moment the healing starts, not with a solution, but with surrender. Therapy isn't the problem. It's the way people use it, as another tool to avoid discomfort, as a weekly escape, as a box to tick. But if you're not willing to go where it hurts, no method will help. The mind is clever. It will use even the language of healing to avoid true contact with the wound. They've tried everything. They've journaled, visualized, reframed, forgiven, and still they wake up with that ache, that quiet hum of unprocessed pain. Because the real wound isn't cognitive, it's cellular. It's in the body. It lives in the breath, the jaw, the stomach. No mantra can reach it. Only presence can. They feel like they're failing because they still hurt. But the truth is, the hurt is not the failure. The pretending was. Healing doesn't mean the pain is gone. It means it's no longer the enemy. It means the war is over, not because it was won, but because it was abandoned. They are not broken. They are exhausted from resisting what wants to be felt, from chasing cures for what was never a disease. Their anxiety is not a malfunction. It's a message. Their sadness is not weakness. It's data. Their rage is not dangerous. It's truth with nowhere to go. The illusion was never in their emotions. It was in the idea that they had to fix them. The systems that promised relief only reinforced the lie that they were the problem. But they were never the problem. They were the symptom of a culture afraid to feel. A culture addicted to looking healed, not being real. As Sun Tzu, they fear their darkness more than they fear failure. Not because it's evil, but because it's unknown. They've spent their entire lives trying to be the light, to be good, generous, calm, patient. But no one ever taught them how to hold their shadow, how to face the part of themselves that isn't polite, isn't nice, isn't liked. Jesus. The shadow isn't a threat. It's a survivor. It holds the emotions they weren't allowed to express, the thoughts they were punished for, the instincts they were told were wrong. It's not the enemy, it's the orphaned truth. And until they turn toward it, they will keep sabotaging every attempt at peace. They blame themselves for patterns they didn't choose, for anger that explodes, for numbness that paralyzes, for reactions that make no sense. But these aren't flaws, they're signals. They carry the imprint of moments the mind forgot, but the body remembered. Until they meet their shadow with compassion, they'll mistake survival for sabotage. Their inner critic isn't random. It's a voice they absorbed early on, a voice that once protected them by forcing control, perfection, silence. It whispered, "Don't feel too much, don't need too much, don't be too much." They obeyed and lost touch with what was real. There's a reason they resist their own power. They associate it with harm, with abandonment, with punishment. So they shrink. They play small. They make themselves digestible. But suppressed power doesn't disappear. It leaks out in anxiety, in resentment, in shame. Their rage is sacred. Their grief is sacred. Their fear is sacred. But they've been taught to pathologize the sacred. They long for freedom, yet fear what freedom will reveal. That they're not the person they pretended to be. That they're messier, louder, angrier, softer. That beneath the mask is someone terrifying and beautiful. But if they don't meet that self, they'll live a life managed by fear, not guided by truth. They confuse kindness with compliance, gentleness with avoidance, peace with passivity. But peace is not the absence of noise. It's the strength to stay when the noise rises, to witness the storm without running, to say, "I see you," not just to others, but to the screaming child within. The shadow doesn't want to destroy their life. It wants to be part of it, not in control, but not exiled. The moment they welcome it, everything begins to shift. Not because the pain ends, but because they're no longer alone with it. They become whole, and wholeness was always more honest than happiness. Jesus. They think the battle is outside, against time, pressure, expectations. But the real war is internal. Between the part that wants to be free and the part that's terrified of what freedom will cost. They're stuck between rebellion and obedience, neither of which brings peace. Sun Tzu. The enemy isn't the pain, it's the division. One voice says, "Push harder." The other whispers, "Please stop." One clings to control, the other longs to collapse. And both are trying to protect them. That's the madness of inner war. Both sides believe they're saving your life. They don't know who they are without the struggle, without the constant performance, without the roles they've worn for so long they forgot their costumes. The achiever, the peacemaker, the strong one, the responsible one. But identity built on survival is not identity, it's armor. And armor is heavy. It keeps them safe, yes, but it also keeps them numb. It blocks connection, blocks truth, blocks the very thing they're desperate to feel. They walk through life armored and wonder why they're lonely. But how can someone be touched through a wall of protection? They're not afraid of the world. They're afraid of being seen, truly seen, without the achievements, without the masks, without the explanations. Just raw, trembling humanity. And in that exposure, they fear rejection. But deeper still, they fear that if someone did accept them, they wouldn't believe it. The mind will do anything to avoid that pain. It will sabotage closeness, chase unavailable people, pick fights, withdraw, all to avoid the terror of intimacy. Because being loved in your truth means being loved in your mess, and they've been trained to clean up before they're worthy. But love doesn't require neatness, it requires presence. And presence doesn't mean perfection. It means staying when everything in you wants to run. Staying with the shame, with the fear, with the part that believes it's unlovable. That's where real transformation begins, not in the light, but in the staying. They crave peace, but avoid what peace asks of them. To slow down, to listen, to stop fixing and start feeling. That's the battlefield now, not out there, but in the refusal to abandon themselves again. Because self-abandonment was the first wound, and every pattern since has been an echo. Healing is not a path forward, it's a return to the body, to truth, to stillness. And the deeper they go, the less they need answers, because they become the space where questions can breathe, where pain is not rushed, where silence is no longer threatening, where they finally come home. Jesus. They carry memories that don't belong to them, fears that started generations ago, guilt passed down like heirlooms, patterns repeated not because they chose them, but because they never saw another way. This is not just personal pain, it's ancestral, cultural, collective. They bleed from wounds they don't remember receiving. A Sun Tzu. And that's why history matters, not as facts or timelines, but as patterns of avoidance, suppression, and denial. Entire societies built on forgetting, on pretending trauma was just a phase, not a force. But pain that isn't acknowledged never disappears. It morphs into addiction, into violence, into silence. They live in a world obsessed with progress but allergic to memory. They praise innovation while burying grief. They celebrate independence while rejecting the elders. They want the future but refuse to digest the past. And so they repeat it over and over, mistaking noise for evolution. They are taught that healing is individual, but no one heals in isolation. The wound was never just theirs, it was absorbed through generations, in how their parents looked at them, in what was never said, in the shame that filled the room when they cried, when they failed, when they simply needed too much. And now they think they're broken, but they are simply carrying what others refuse to feel. The pain of the mother who had to stay strong, the silence of the father who was never allowed to weep, the rage of ancestors who never found justice. It lives in their nervous system, waiting for space, waiting to be seen. They believe healing is becoming someone new, but sometimes healing is becoming who your lineage never had the chance to be. To break the cycle not by fighting it, but by feeling it, by sitting in the ache and saying, "This ends with me," not in anger, but in awareness. Legacy is not just what we leave behind, it's what we inherit unconsciously. The roles, the beliefs, the limits, and every time they choose truth over comfort, presence over performance, they rewrite the script, not just for themselves, for the ones who came before and the ones who will come after. But this requires courage, not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the courage to stay soft in a world that hardened your parents, to be still in a culture addicted to speed, to listen deeply in a lineage that survived by staying silent. The war they are fighting did not start with them, but it can end with them, not through perfection, but through presence, through their willingness to feel what was never felt, to name what was never named, and in doing so, to become the living proof that another way is possible. A Sun Tzu. They seek answers in noise. Podcasts, reels, headlines, debates. Their minds are full, but their hearts remain untouched. They mistake information for wisdom, stimulation for connection. But truth doesn't scream. It whispers, and most have lost the capacity to hear what whispers beneath the chaos. Jesus. Silence terrifies them, because in silence, the truth gets loud, and they're afraid of what they'll hear, not from others, but from themselves. The disappointment, the anger, the unmet longings, the quiet grief of living a life that looks good but feels empty. So they run, not from pain, but from awareness. They chase healing as if it's somewhere else. Another course, another teacher, another version of themselves they haven't become yet. But healing isn't somewhere else. It's in the place they're avoiding, in the breath they ignore, in the emotion they keep numbing, in the body they treat like an inconvenience. They associate stillness with laziness, with weakness, because they were trained to measure worth by output, by doing, by constantly proving their existence through effort. But peace doesn't come from doing more. It comes from finally being with what is, without fixing, managing, improving. Just being. And in that being, everything starts to unravel. The fake smiles, the forced certainty, the roles that kept them safe but made them small. And what's left? The child, the artist, the truth-teller, the part of them that never needed to be perfect, only present. But to find that self again, they must first stop pretending they know who they are. The deeper they go, the more they realize there is no finish line, no final healed version, no perfect state, just layers, just invitations to meet themselves again and again, with more honesty each time. And when they accept that, the pressure dissolves, because they stop trying to arrive and begin to live. Presence is not passive, it's fierce. It means facing discomfort instead of numbing it, listening instead of controlling, softening instead of defending. It's not the absence of emotion, it's the capacity to feel fully, without collapsing or running. That's what power looks like when it's rooted, not performative. They think freedom is the absence of pain, but real freedom is the absence of resistance to pain. It's the end of the inner war. The moment they stop fighting themselves, they realize there was never anything wrong with them, just layers of noise, just the echo of a world that forgot how to be quiet. And now they remember, not through effort, through surrender, through stillness, through the sacred act of finally listening. Jesus. They think the world is falling apart, but maybe, for the first time, it's falling into truth. The illusions are burning, the systems are shaking, and what's left is raw, unfiltered humanity, scared, disconnected, and searching. But this isn't the end, it's the threshold, and what comes next depends entirely on how deeply they're willing to face themselves. For Sun Tzu, no war outside will ever stop until the inner war ends. The collapse they fear isn't destruction, it's correction. The chaos is not punishment, it's the result of too many generations refusing to feel. Every empire that ignored the soul eventually crumbled, but every soul that found stillness became unshakable. The future won't be saved by intellect alone, or power, or control. It will be saved by those who choose to feel, to slow down, to reconnect with the breath, the body, the earth beneath them. This planet doesn't need more innovation. It needs presence, reverence, simplicity. Technology moves faster than wisdom, and that is the real danger. They've built machines to answer every question, except the ones that matter. Who am I without my role? What do I serve that's bigger than me? What does it mean to live without betraying myself? They don't need more answers. They need practices. Practices that ground, that regulate, that return them to what's real. Sit, breathe, touch the ground with bare feet. Speak honestly to someone without needing to be right. Let the body tremble without fixing it. Forgive themselves for surviving the only way they knew how. The only future worth building is the one rooted in presence. Not productivity, not performance, but truth. Not collective agreement, collective honesty. The courage to say, I don't know, I need help, I'm scared, I'm here. And if enough people choose that kind of presence, everything changes. Not overnight, not perfectly, but deeply. The systems can't hold when the people stop pretending. The harm can't continue when the silence ends. The numbness dissolves when the breath returns. They don't need to save the world. They need to stop abandoning themselves. The world follows that. That's how it always begins, not with revolutions, but with returns, to breath, to body, to truth, one human at a time. If these words are speaking to something in you, subscribe to the channel. Let the algorithms carry this to others who are finally ready to face what matters. Subscribe to the Telegram, where we speak without masks and meet in truth, not performance. And if you felt something shift inside you, leave a comment below. Write, "I no longer run from my pain." Let's see how many are ready for honesty. Or write, "My darkness is my strength." Let's build a community of those who are done pretending. And if this moved something deep in you, write, "I take off the mask." Let this be your commitment to yourself. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The beginning of what can no longer be avoided. And maybe, finally, the beginning of something real.